Welcome to one of the past HSC exam question videos. In this exam question video, I'm going to cover this exam question, which comes from the 2011 paper, and it's question 21, with 4 marks. While doing a second, I'll read the actual question. Once I've read the question, you get about 5 seconds to pause the video. Once I pause the video, attempt the question, and then press ready, or press play when you're ready. So I'll read the question itself. It says, identify 2 methods used to treat drinking water to reduce the risk of infection. That's worth 2 marks. And B is outline how the use of each of these methods reduces the risk of infection. That's also worth 2 marks. So when you're ready, pause the video and attempt the question. And then when you press play, I'll go over a sample answer for each of A and B and give you some mark guidelines as well for both A and B to show you what to do to get full marks. So when you're ready, press pause and attempt the question. Welcome back. Alright, so question A says identify. That means just more or less, in this case, name. So identify 2 methods used to treat drinking water to reduce the risk of infection. And because it says 2, obviously don't mention 1, that you will only get 1 mark. But the marking guideline says you need to name 2 methods, and that's it. So name 2 methods, and 2 methods will get you full 2 marks. And in this case, they're both chlorination and boiling of water. Remember, chlorination, that was covered in the dot point where we talked about the treatment of water, the water treatment plant. And chlorination was a stage, so this was the disinfection stage. So chlorination was like the 4th stage of that whole cycle. And that's what we should have talked about. So just briefly about how chlorine or chlorination, adding of chlorine, kills water. You shouldn't have done that for this one, but for the next one, so for B. But here you should say chlorination and boiling. And if any other ones pop to mind, then you could add those as well, but I mean these are the 2 which are usually talked about: chlorination and boiling of water. So all you've done for this one is just name them, right? So I just wrote boiling of water and chlorination. Tick tick, that's your 2 marks. And the next one is outline how the use of each of these methods reduces the risk of infection, right? So in this case, you have to outline, so not just say that they reduce the risk of infection, but how. And what you have to do for the marking guideline, it says sketch in general terms, so you can be quite vague, how each of the named methods reduces the risk of infection. So the main thing you should be talking about here is actually how, for example, boiling water will kill pathogens, right? Or how adding chlorine will kill pathogens. You don't have to be too descriptive, you don't have to give too much detail, but just mention that they kill pathogens. And by killing pathogens, that means there's less disease because pathogens cause disease. That's what you should also be saying, right? You should actually mention that killing pathogens cause less disease because pathogens cause disease. And both boiling water and chlorine do that job quite well. Right, so this is what I wrote. Again, this first statement, it's something that you can write. It's not a super requirement, but it'd be useful. And I just wrote, by reducing the amount of pathogens in water, we also reduce the amount of pathogens that enter our body and cause disease. This is just to say, right, so this would have been more of an explain, right? We only had a outline. But if you have the time, you can just add that in, because what we were saying here, okay, we reduce the amount of pathogens, which means reduce the amount of disease, because they can't get into our body and cause disease, right? But what you should definitely have said is either this here, did both these points. So first I talk about boiling water. So boiling water for 10 minutes will kill most pathogens. Alright, that's basically really enough to get you a mark. But I just put in brackets because they denature the pathogen's enzymes, right? So by denaturing these enzymes, it'll kill the pathogen. But you wouldn't have had to write that. It says in general terms of what the actual marking guideline said. So by saying, okay, killing those, by boiling water, it'll kill the pathogens. And that's what will make sure we have less spread of disease. That's already going to be good enough. And then by saying, adding chlorine will reduce the risk of infection by killing most pathogens in that water supply, as chlorine is toxic to these pathogens. Again, that's more or less what you have to say for that. By adding chlorine, that will reduce the risk of infection because it kills the pathogens, because chlorine is toxic to pathogens. And what I wrote in brackets is just going into a bit more detail, which is saying that chlorine attacks for example, chlorine attacks the bacterial wall and will destroy it, right? But again, you didn't have to go into that much detail. I just added in just to have something in there. Also maybe for you for quick revision as well, in terms of maybe something to examine in terms of a higher order question. But where these questions come from, they came from these 2 dot points. So explain why cleanliness in food, water, and personal hygiene, in this case we talked about water, assist in the control of disease. But So that's how does being good when it comes to water control, boiling water, how that would help spread disease. But this dot point is more in terms of where it came from. So gather information from secondary sources to describe ways in which drinking water can be treated, and those two ways were the boiling water and chlorination. Right, so that's from this part of the actual dot point. But then it says explain how these methods can reduce the risk of infection from pathogens. And this was just the idea that this first part, by reducing the amount of pathogens in water, we would also reduce the amount of those pathogens entering our body, and thereby less disease is caused. That's just that last statement. But overall, that's where those questions came from. I hope that was useful.